All right, well, good noontide to you all. No longer top of the morning, not also afternoon. We're right in that liminal space, right in the middle of the day. And my name is Ranger Kane West. I'm a park ranger over there at Hot Springs National Park. Been there for about 4 years. I'm currently the acting interpretation program manager. So that means that anything that happens with the public via education or programming or at the front desk sort of falls under my umbrella. Hot Springs has around 2.5 million visitors a year. We probably have about 300,000 people who come through the Fordyce Visitor Center every year, so it's about 1,000 people a day, so we're quite busy. And there's a handful of us hardy folks with paid staff and volunteers. So that's what I'm normally doing. And then, because I get to be sort of in charge, I also get to do these presentations. So this is the Park Chat Speaker Series. We do it alongside the Garland County Library, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is our attempt to have more programming that reaches community members. We have 2 spots in the front, but they're separate from each other, so y'all can decide how close you want to sit.
They keep us from fighting.
Yeah.
You can sit together. Thank you, that's what I'm saying. Thanks.
So, yeah, there's the rest of everyone.
Speak for
You know,
yourself.
because we have youth invigorating water here at Hot Springs. Last year we did park chats that were trying to introduce some of the general geology, some of the general history of the park. And every time I would give a presentation, people would say, yeah, but like, which spring is the best spring? Okay, I got to give the people what they want, right? We're in the people business. We're selling them free programs, but we got to make the programs worth their while. You've now entered into our tiny chair setting, so we got you covered. So it's going to be about a 45-minute program. I usually have about 5 jokes per presentation. We've used 2 of them already. So best of luck with the rest of this. We're keeping the lights bright so that we don't get too much snoozing. But I usually get about 10% snoozing per program. And that's a good laugh. And again, I'm with the Park Service, and I'm Ranger Kane. The Park Chat Speaker Series, this is our first year to do it every month. Last year we did it every 2 months so that everybody would forget about it between each program. We were trying to get folks to come back, but we have a monthly program. Next month is going to be Mary Beth Trubitt, who is sort of the leading archaeologist of the whole region, Southern Arkansas. So I'm very excited to have her aboard. We couldn't do this without our friends at the Garland County Library. Thank you, Aubrey. Thank you, Paul. And he also makes it virtual. So next time, if you
saw that, but we want to come in person.
to taste the water. Well, we get a lot of people online, and probably like during allergy season, it's a great place to be is online and not walking around sneezing. But and then the Friends of Hot Springs National Park, that is our sort of 501c3 board that does a lot of our community events, and they can help promote the park, and they help to support this program. So, drinking the Hot Springs waters. This is a very exciting program because this is my 9th park to be at. I've seen thousands of people come through parks. And in none of those places all around the United States have I seen so many community members who use the park for its resource, right? There are thousands of gallons a month that are distributed via people just filling up a jug. Most of the time, it's people who've been there before, and then it's randomly like a family, and they just give the small cup to the child, and they put it in the hot water, and the child rubs their hand. But it's part of the drinking process. There is always somebody outside at one of the drinking fountains. They're always talking to folks. They're always saying, don't talk to me, I'm just filling up my water. We know that people are told about drinking the water going back generations. Like my grandmother told me, my mother told me, I told myself. And some people, maybe you among them, will use the water either as part of their drinking materials or as their exclusive domestic water consumption, which again is remarkable. what kind of a park what an example of what a federal park, a public park can be, that we protect the springs, we protect the source of the springs, and that we can all enjoy this together. I mean, some of the best water that you're gonna find anywhere. Yes.
Like glass jug, do you sell those?
It might be sold at the Lamar Bathhouse.
It is. I own one of those.
And how much are they?
I think it was like 12 or 13.
And is it a gallon or how many? Let's say
Half
half
Yeah.
gallon. Half gallon?
Just, I'm not personally endorsing the purchase of any bottle, but the crowd has spoken. There's a crowd. So, and you can always get a monogram. There's a lot of places that sell glassware, and sometimes it has monograms about. So, there's probably, I can't imagine another park that I've been to except for, when I worked at Arlington Cemetery, where the people were connected with that place and they went back over and over and over. So this is going to be a history and science of the springs, but I do want to get a show of hands. We're going to go through a series of questions so I can get to know y'all. Do you collect any of the drinking water in Hot Springs National Park? Raise your hand for yes, exclamation mark. And then no, for this is awkward. Fantastic. Thank you for being so brave. So for the most part, right, we got people who either want to come in here and learn about the springs or just good sports about it. Secondly, how did you start collecting the water? Yeah, options, we'll go back to them. My family introduced me to the water. I dabbled for years before committing. Sort of a situationship with the water. I found out from a friend, or I moved here because of the water. We had hands raised for every single one of those. Imagine how cool it is. We recognize that there are places where the water is special, and we share it either between our family. It took us a while, but we finally committed. Somebody told us, or even just marketing like, Google, where should I move for good water? Or whatever it is that we search these days. All right. This is a very important discussion. And I know this because today I was filling up one of our water jugs and the woman at one of the places said, well, I'm here today, but usually I'm at the other spring. Right? Because people, and I have one of our park rangers, he's actually switched springs recently, and it's kind of hard to tell people, right? So he went from Happy Hollow to the front. So, does anybody have a specific spring that they definitely use? All right, raise your hand if you are a primary or exclusive Whittington Spring.
We don't know where those.
50 feet.
That's fantastic. We have maps. What got you set up?
No, because we go to them, but we don't know the names of them maybe.
Where do you, well, we can make a candidate connection. It doesn't matter. What does it look like when
It's
you go
up
there?
by our hotel to Arlington.
You go to the
Oh,
Happy
I
Hollow
know.
Spring.
I think I talked to you yesterday about that.
We do both.
Good.
She does the whole, I do the whole. Well, only because I don't have glass bottles yet.
We did fill up the thermal spring, but we filled them up with glass first.
Yeah.
All right, so we have Whittington. We had a fair amount for Whittington. Happy Hollow, the one over by the Arlington, and the thermal springs. Okay. Do you ever have you all had a fight over which spring to go to? Have you had family discussions about making a switch? It's not ready, right? Yeah, and you're in it. What were you thinking between?
We've had family discussions.
Yeah.
I wanted to go here, see that.
I like the thermal springs, my sister likes the Whittington.
Okay. Does it
It
end
tastes
in,
different.
right, does it end in fisticuffs? Does it end in?
Do you have videos?
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, it can become very dangerous. I say it's like the Sharks and the Jets, right? People are going by, they got their jug in one hand and they're doing the snap in the other. I won't tell y'all which one I use, but I will tell you, about the time that this photo was taken, there was a place in Canada that was looking that had created their first park at a hot spring. And they were looking for the example of how to manage that place. And they chose Hot Springs, Arkansas. And that place, that park in Canada, came to be known as Banff Hot Springs Reservation, named and modeled off of Hot Springs Reservation at the time. And then 2 years later, they're like, you know what, we're gonna model this off of Yellowstone instead. So Banff National Park, modeled off of Yellowstone, but the original protection of Banff, the oldest national park in Canada, is modeled off of Hot Springs.
So
And what
fun
year was
fact,
that?
it's closer for us to come here than to go to Banff. That's how far we are. It's 3 days to Banff, it's a day and a half here in Toronto. Area,
Okay.
not right in Toronto.
I also have family that lives in the Toronto area, but they're like distant cousins, so I can't make that connection. Lastly, we talk to a lot of visitors when we're at the park, and they'll usually say, can I drink that? If you've ever collected the water, you know that you all are actually just as much of the interpreters of this place as we are, because y'all are sort of like local celebrities when you're filling up water and you hear them say, they drink it. So, have you ever had a visitor ask you about what you're doing when you're collecting the water? And what do you tell them? Let me make sure we're on the same page here.
The truth.
Well, people are really impressed that we come all the way from Canada, number one. But we tell them it's for our arthritis, but so do other people. I've met so many people that said as long as they drink this water, their arthritis doesn't bother them.
It's amazing. And we'll talk about that briefly, but that's, I can't make any guarantees. I am a doctor, but not a medical doctor. But that's why people have been coming for a long time here.
I do the thermal springs, and there's been several times when people say, do you drink it when it's so hot? And I have to remind them that water does eventually cool down.
So thank you all for being presenters to the national park. All right, so just to give a quick reference point for the springs, you have springs that are going to come out in a variety of ways. Basically, water goes down, it stops, and then it comes back out. That's sort of your spring. In a lot of cases, the water will go down to some sort of fracture or joint and then get pushed up. So a lot of our cold springs actually look like this. This is a perched aquifer. We don't have those in the park. And then this is it goes down, hits a fault line and comes back up. So down, stop, out is your basic framework. And here in Hot Springs, rains into the recharge zone, goes down super far, about 8,000 feet, hits a fault line, comes back up to the surface. You turn on a spigot and you say, ouch, that's hot, which is the result of this long journey. So, we have a science story, we'll go back over that, but what I want to start with, because I'm a historian, is the history of drinking spring water. This is the oldest recorded reference to the hot springs that I've been able to find. It goes back to 1771. It was a French traveler. He was friends with the Quapaw in southeast Arkansas, and they're going to mention to him that the Arkansas country is very often visited by Western Indians who come here to take baths, for there are certain hot waters that gush forth from sources in Mexico. So our first reference, it's vague, it may or may not, it's sort of like, it's probably hot springs. They don't say, they didn't put a map on it. But he's also, he's talking in the 1770s, it does not look, the map of North America does not look the way it does today. So anything that's west of Mississippi is going to be what's considered Mexico if we're French. But they're coming for baths, there's certain hot waters. And so the Quapaw, who are over here, southeast Arkansas, are really talking about hot springs as sort of a mingling area, probably with the Caddo, who have been here for at least 1,000 years. I think it's really fun to find this. The original French probably sounds much cooler with I can't do my French accent, but maybe y'all can because you're close to Quebec.
Actually, we're from, we grew up, but yeah.
Well. Well, we also, you said Wisconsin?
Yes.
All right, so the reason that the French are friends with the Quapaw is because Marquette and Joliet from Wisconsin, well, via Wisconsin, come down the Mississippi River. They get stopped in Quapaw, the Arkansas Territory, they become allies, and that alliance persists for over a century. Boom. All right, we got them covered. Everybody else has to see.
Can I
keep on-
take a picture of that? I want to do some research at home,
Sure.
because that's kind of cool. Okay, where's the camera? Sorry, we'll hold up.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
We also are a place of legend. Who here has heard that this is the fountain of youth discovered by Hernando de Soto in the 1540s? Yeah, it's a very good marketing line. It comes from a reference point in one of the journals where the horses are going to drink from warm, brackish water, and then their bellies distend. They get actually stomach cramps. The historical archaeology pushes the route of DeSoto further north in Hot Springs, so he almost certainly did not come through Hot Springs. It's going to be north, and then he's going to be south. But it's really good for marketing because they would say that DeSoto came through here because they could then say that the Hot Springs are the fountain of youth. And if you want to get people to come down from New York and Wisconsin and Rhode Island and Canada, you got to sell them something. We do have early written descriptions from Europeans. This is the second earliest European eyewitness account of Hot Springs. The first one had a lot of volcanoes in it, so it's probably not super accurate. And it said there was volcanic explosions happening. But then the next year we have Hunter and Dunbar expedition. They come through and they basically are noticing the exact same things that visitors today also ask. There's nothing that has changed between a visitor in 1804 and a visitor in 2026. They stop by and immediately taste the hot springs water after letting it cool down, like Paul said. And then it tastes good. Good. It's very good water, right? So far, so good. We're 2 for 2. Now, then some people pretended to have discovered cathartic properties, right? Things that make you feel better, right? So we're 3 for 3. But this guy has been unable to detect the existence of such a quality of water. So people have been drinking the water, noticing it tastes good, it's hot, maybe it'll make them feel better. And that has been a framework for why people are coming to the hot springs for years, for the next 2 centuries. Now, in 1832, Hot Springs is set aside as Hot Springs Reservation. That makes us the oldest place in the federal government that's a protected public resource or natural resource for the public good. That never happened before. It's a giant hospital. So Hot Springs is a giant nature hospital. The water that is the primary was intended to be the primary medical resource, but the mountains as well. So the idea is that the land can heal you and that the water can soothe you. And at the center of all of that has always been bathing. Bathing and sweating are generally resorted to. This is somebody just after the national park or the reservation is established, and his name is George Engelman. He's German, and he says that the simplest bathing happens in the stream. People just walk into Hot Springs Creek. It's cooled off there, and the creek ranges from about 130 to about 90 degrees, depending on where you're at in it. Yeah.
Can you still walk in that spring?
If today the Hot Springs Fire Department is down in Hot Springs Creek beneath the bathhouses, but they're the only ones who are going to go down there, and the sewer people.
Oh, okay, so you can't walk in that.
You can't walk in that creek beneath the bathhouses at this point. It became basically a sewage dump.
Oh.
Is that a hand, or are you just anxious about me needing more colorful photos? I can do both. And so bathing becomes 21 baths, right? That sounds familiar if you've ever been into the bathhouse. There's a tub bath, right? So you get in the bathtub, a vapor bath, so this is steam, and then you get wrapped in a blanket. If you've gone to the Buckstaff, you've had that experience. And this is from 1874. So the tradition of bathing in Hot Springs goes back to the 1870s. But the point of these quotes is to show that bathing is the centerpiece of coming to Hot Springs. Old bathhouse, vapor in a tub, getting the wrap, right? So this photo is, it could have just as well been 1874 as 1924. And Hot Springs developed with a whole string of bathhouses. So this is as Hot Springs is emerging. This is actually what the Canadian representatives would have seen when they came down about 10 years after this in 1885 or 1884. But bathing is at the heart. But you'll see from this image that there's always drinking of the water as part of the medicinal process. It is drank as hot as can be borne. Some of the early bathhouses, they would actually just be over a spring. So you would get the steam coming off of the spring. So imagine that you're standing in a shack over the display spring behind the Maurice today. And then you're also drinking copious draughts of hot and hot. So hot and hot was bathe warm, drink warm. Somebody else came and said that it is not only drunk in great quantities, super hot, but if you add salt and pepper, it's a nice soup. And so what this tells us is that there are a whole bunch of different medical theories at the time. This is actually coming from probably Thomsonian medical theory, which is all about cayenne pepper. Paul just indicated that he'd heard of it before, but drinking the water gets integrated into different people's medical ideas about how to use the water.
I was actually indicating I'm going to try that.
Oh. I've thought about it, and so I'll just use hot cocoa instead. We're an excellent spot for National Hot Cocoa Day, which is like December 12th. So it's past, be prepared. Yeah.
So at the hot springs, the bathhouses, they regulate the temperature, correct? It's like to what, like 104 or something?
104 is going to be the max. It's also the max for your hot tub at home. And that understanding of what the maximum temperature is before the body is going to overheat comes from probably mistakes made at hot springs and similar places in the 1870s. So you picked a good time.
Are there any places in nature where we can go into and
The water comes out too hot, but we will see, I erased the reference to it, the water comes out too hot to bathe. So historically, and the reason I showed that quote about bathing in the spring, or the creek, is that most people in hot springs never bathe directly at a spring opening, because there either wasn't enough water or it was too hot, and they might sit up to their legs. They had to dig out into the rock, and they might get up to 18 inches deep, but it was just much to get the amount of people who bathed in hot springs, even from the get-go. You needed to have bathhouses to be able to manage that number. That's just from not even from a convenience standpoint, but just like a functionality standpoint, because the spring openings are too small. And how do you drink the waters? Everybody has a Rao cup. Rao cup's named after something called neuralgia. And then if you're walking around in hot springs 150 years ago, everybody's got a Rao cup, eagerly quaffing the thermal water. And so just to prove that this quote is accurate, everybody's got a Rao cup. Now you could use this to just drink straight. You could use it to make tea. You could use it to scald a hog. You could use it to do your dishes. You could use it to clean your clothes. But you would just see Rao cups everywhere. And a lot of photos, we've upgraded over time. You'll see later today that instead of these tin cans, we have paper cups, courtesy of your federal government. So don't worry, we're going to get real fancy. But just to give you a reference point for someone who is part of all of this, meriting these wonderful waters. There's a guy who writes in his autobiography that the doctors had passed judgment that he could not live longer than 6 months. And an old doctor advises him to go to hot springs. He has had to lift it out of the stage and put to bed. He can't even go into a bathhouse for 2 weeks. It's too hard to get there. But after a while, he began to improve. His name was Samuel Fordyce. He's going to go on and become probably the primary developer of the national park, with the bathhouses and the hotels and the Army Navy Hospital. So what is it people's ideas about what's working? Doctors are going to say one thing, and then people are going to have all sorts of different ideas, right? So hot springs is always this mix of legend and science. So
Give me
we
my notepad.
have,
Give me my notepad. Give me my
so
notepad.
just to let y'all
Give
know,
me my notepad. No, give me
Uh,
that. I want my notepad.
come to hot springs for different reasons. Does anybody need a breather? Um, Sorry. You're tough. So, if you come to hot springs and you're drinking the hot springs water, you have to have stories about why you're drinking the hot springs water. There has to be some purpose that gets told and shared that you're gonna like convince other people or convince yourself. And if you are a medical journal, right, you're saying that the water washes out the system, that it carries off impurities, right? This is some of the purest natural spring water in the world. We'll see if that's the case later on. And it's a powerful diaphoretic and eliminative. So if you're having digestion issues, if you need some tums, you want to drink the hot springs water. If you are a baseball player or a baseball manager and you're concerned about your players' drinking habits, that's when you're going to boil the whiskey out of your baseball players. Right? So different people, right? It's the medical journal, the non-medical journal. Everybody's got a reason for coming to the hot springs. Now, this is part of why are they thinking about drinking the hot springs water by the 1870s? It is part of a national movement, right? There are hundreds of mineral spa resorts around the United States. One of the most famous ones is over in Saratoga Springs in New York. I hope you're all from near Saratoga Springs, otherwise it's kind of awkward. Are y'all from like near Saratoga Springs or y'all are western New York?
Long Island.
Okay, Long Island. Okay, so up from y'all, and where are y'all from?
Long Island.
Okay, so up from y'all. It's close enough. All right. So there's mineral spa resorts all over the United States. Today we don't think of them, but we actually are part of the residual of those. Captain Springs in West Virginia. Poland Spring in Maine. Have you ever heard of Poland Spring bottling water? Right. This is a national pastime. This guy's having a great time just drinking water. 1885. Right. So the Dr. Pepper Coca-Cola mix is coming out of that same time period of creating some sort of type of tonic waters and things like that. It's also happening, and I've gone to these places to test them for you. Whittington Springs, Colorado, you can go drink the hot springs water. They do have signs everywhere that says this is not chlorinated or this might have too much manganese in it, so drink at your own risk. And so I drank at my own risk. Berkeley Springs in West Virginia, one of the oldest spa towns in the United States. Sulphur Springs in Oklahoma was once a national park designed after drinking the hot springs water. You can go to Pavilion Spring over there. Collier Springs is in Arkansas. It's a little bit away from us. I did this on my own time. I'm not verifying and validating these as a national park representative. I'm just saying that I've gone there. And I took photos of some of them. Solduck Hot Springs in Washington State. It's inside Olympic National Park. I've not been to Ashland, Oregon. They have water that you can drink. And I've not been to Bath, England. I've just not been to England. And you can also drink those places. Has anybody been to one of these spots? Has anybody tried the water? Has anybody tasted the sulfur in the water? Yeah. super sulfury, super something, super sulfur. I'm sure it has other stuff. Super sulfury. And so you can go and drink from these places, but also, let me make sure I get to that. I have to erase one more thing. Hopefully not. I should be able to make reference to other local bottling companies. Here in Hot Springs, we're also going to market different springs. And so different springs will have different purposes. I'm going to read off their names, and I want you to say if you think that that is a health marketing or a like bathhouse marketing. Alum Springs, health marketing, bathhouse marketing. Health, right? So it's going to have alum in it. Arsenic Springs, health or bathhouse? Question mark? All right. People seem indecisive. Big Iron Spring, health, bathhouse? 68. Sure. Also, you didn't see this small page that I said. Fordyce Spring, health, bathhouse? Bathhouse. You can see this today. Magnesia Spring, health. There is a bathhouse that's put there later. Egg Spring. You can drink it. It's actually just more to say, hey, I can poach an egg in 15 minutes. All right, let's see how you did. I'm only going to pick a couple. Arsenic Spring is no longer, well, it does exist. The pavilion is no longer there. It's basically where Arlington Park is. If you've ever been to the Superior Bathhouse, it's about 50 yards north of Superior Bathhouse. That's the northernmost spring in Hot Springs. Arsenic Springs. The ladies may be seen congregated there, quaffing this thermal water. It is said and generally believed by many of the fair ones that this water has a tendency to heighten the complexion and beauty of the skin.
So if you drink it or sprinkle it on your face?
Both. Any of the above. But you have to be dressed in Victorian garb. That is the case. Big Iron Spring, the largest of the hot springs, actually about some years, a third of all the water in Hot Springs came out of this spot. It was like a little volcano looking deal. This is the great resort for both ladies and gentlemen. Easy of access. They're often seen sitting in the rocks in groups or formations in front of the spring.
So these places no longer.
They do exist. They are under the ground.
Oh.
And they are protected at this point. And if there's a walking tour, if you want to know where those are located, we have a walking tour on our Facebook, our NPS app, and it'll take you to some of these major springs. And this is a picture of Alum Spring, but really the quote here is that there are various names for these waters, even if their properties are all the same. So in essence, most of the hot springs, they're very similar. They don't really have that much difference in their chemical makeup, but if you market them as being slightly different, then people will go to different springs. Arsenic was popular even in the 1850s and 1860s because it was seen as skin beautifying, and they knew it was bad, but it's hard to, you gotta work at it if you want to be as fair complexioned and beauty as you would like. And then different doctors would actually set up by some of these springs, and they would have their offices either on top of or next to, sort of quasi-claiming the spring. So different resident physicians prescribe different waters for different ailments. They're very clearly part of this national movement, but you would choose different springs for different purposes. There's also Liver Spring, there was Cornhole Spring, there was the mud baths, there's dozens of springs with different names. There are other springs around the state of Arkansas, partly because our rocks are crazy. Y'all see these rocks are supposed to lay down flat? Not here in Arkansas. No. We're going to move Pig Suey our rocks into crazy formations, allowing them to go down, stop, and then come out in weird ways. The result is Chalavine Springs, which all of you have driven by. Some of you are going to drive back by on the way. Today it's the wedding chapel. It's right here, the water wheel. That was owned by Hiram Whittington. Then we have Mountain Valley Springs, which was developed in the 1870s. So people would come to Hot Springs, and then 12 miles away, you would get on a carriage ride and go to a little day trip at Mountain Valley Springs. Sort of a whole region. So Hot Springs is the center, and then a whole region of water springs. And people people have been bottling Mountain Valley spring water. I don't know if y'all ever heard of Mountain Valley spring water, but it is bottled in this area. It's supposed to be a good joke, it didn't work. But you can see that they're originally saying that it's a natural diuretic. It has, flushes the kidneys. I'm not sure who tested that out, but that's what they would have, the marketing is for mineral spring water as a health benefit. It's part of that same national movement. They didn't have the green bottles yet. And then Ozarka, if anybody's ever heard of Ozarka water, it's originally from Eureka Springs.
They sell that spring Mountain Valley water in Canada. You can actually get it ordered. All the way from
Is Ozarka still coming out of Eureka Springs?
It is not. It's coming out of Texas. The Eureka Springs recharge zone has been compromised for the spring system, unfortunately. So, at least some of it has. And so you used to be able to make ginger ale from Arkansas Ozarka water, and now you can make your own at-home ginger ale somehow, I don't know, from your Texas-based Ozarka water. But this is to show that hot springs is part of this state, which is part of this national movement for people wanting to drink water. Because water is the most prominent public health intervention of the late 19th century. If you have clean water, you can have a healthy people. Right? That's the idea, that most diseases of those times were coming from bad water. So we have this landscape. It's for the health resort. This is it's about to become a great American spa. You have bathhouses everywhere. You have the Army Navy Hospital. But we're going to start landscaping with fountains. In the 1890s, they try to transform hot springs into this wonderful federal oasis healing mecca. They're going to put drinking fountains all around. This guy is very old. He's been standing there for a long time. This is the Noble Fountain. It's a beautiful sculpture. Again, it's from the 1890s. It's been in a couple of locations, but people would just gather at one of the fountains at Hot Springs, Arkansas, and they'd just be drinking the water. So you just literally, it's like the water cooler talk, but from 100 years ago.
Where is it now?
It is right here at the entrance to the Grand Promenade, right beneath the Army Navy Hospital.
Although, is the water treated in any way?
It's a great question that I need to speed up to answer, but you'll find out in about 5 slides. But maybe. We also have the Shell Fountain, that's right behind the Fort Ice. It's in the Stevens Balustrade, you can just go drink the water straight out of it. And if the national park or the federal reservation is making themselves a health landscape and adding the water, then by the early 1900s, to really federalize themselves, they go into the science of the water. To legitimize the hot springs claims, they want to start studying the water. And so as early as 1902, there's going to be just repeated federal surveys of the hot springs water. They're going to identify the springs. They're going to put temperatures on them. And they're going to just start churning out studies of the water. So we've been consistently studied by federal officials for over a century. And the finding is that these are remarkably pure and a very small amount of minerals. Not only that, but there are cold water springs that are going to get added to our system. So Happy Hollow really gets developed in the 1880s. It's called Magnesia Spring at the time because they're trying to sell the health. And they had this really cool, there's different examples of what they had over the top of the spring system, but today the park acquired Happy Hollow Spring in the 1960s and has had a free jug station. Previously it was off, you had to pay like a small amount, 5 cents or something.
5 cents when my grandmother worked there.
There you go. That is awesome.
I wish I could remember, I think I have a picture somewhere of her at the spring.
That'd be incredible. Oh, amazing, right? So talk about generations drinking the water. That's really special. Thank you for asking that. And it comes out of an evacuolite layer in the rocks. We also have the cold spring at Whittington. I'm still looking for early references to Whittington Springs development that you'll see points of reference in the 1890s. People have known about it for a while. And it emerges from the Big Fort Church rock layer as well as another shale layer, right? So different springs with different rock sources. Yeah.
So these actually come out cold if they're not cooled down.
Correct. These are totally different water systems. But whether the hot or the cold people come here and they're just walking around and they are drinking the water. They are quaffing the elixir, and it's really cool. They get in your Sunday best and go to Tunnel Spring or Dripping Spring or to the Noble Fountain. This is Magdalena Walker. She's the first woman to charter a bank in American history. She would come to Hot Springs in the 1920s to collect the water. So if you do this today, you're a part of a tradition. It goes back to at least your grandma. So, what have we discovered since then? We have stories of rocks and water. We have scientists, as my friend Jess, doing research on the water. And we can build on those previous research findings of the springs and their temperature, right? So we have a relative temperature profile for individual springs that goes back over a century. So this is some of the longest studied, scientifically studied water that you can imagine. But we've changed our assessments from medical views, right? So we don't make the claims that we once did about the medical benefits of the water. Now we focus more on water chemistry. We just need it to be clean. We need to be naturally clean, and if it's not naturally potable, then we need to help it get there. And so we now study not only temperature, we study things that have to do with the total amount of minerals in there, study the pH, right? So 1 to 14, 7 is neutral, our bodies are around 7.3. Oxygen, and I'm not a hydrologist, so I'm not quite sure what all these do, but according to our graph, we can talk about the hardness of water, we can talk about how it, what it's taken out of nearby rocks and stuff. So this is what we study, especially our science nerds are studying every day. This is their job, is to study and have data on the water every day. And they record a whole slew of information. And so we have multiple springs that are studied, and yet each of them usually studied about once a week. And so this is constant. This is for the hot springs. And we have an average coming out of here. The average is slightly distorted because the Big Iron Spring, the hottest springs, one of the biggest water producers is also one of our hottest springs. And so it increases the temperature, even if other springs are much lower in temperature. But we can get these ranges that tell us about our average temperature, our average pH, the dissolved oxygen, the specific conductivity, right? We can learn about the characteristics and the quality of the hot springs water.
What does the SPC stand? What does that mean?
It's specific conductivity. So it's like almost, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm not even going to try, but it's something about how the mineral in the water allows for almost like an electric current. Because the conductivity is, but don't quote me on that. Yeah, oxygen, dissolved oxygen, barometric, potential hydrogen, temperature. So we've studied the water. We have a general sense of what's in the water. And just to give a reference point before you start looking at these things, all of our studies going back to the 1800s say that the water is distinct in large part because of its low mineral concentration. There's not much in it. And that's it's probably because the rocks that it goes through are almost a pure silica, right? So, or especially with the Novaculite and the Big Fork Chert, we just don't have, the rocks themselves are almost a pure rock, and they don't precipitate out that much minerals. And then compared to other groundwater in Arkansas, don't look at that typo, that's from me, it's not from him. Usually water has up to 2 or 3 times as much mineral content as the hot springs water. So it going through the ground and going through the rocks, in some sense, filters out a lot of the mineral washouts that you might imagine. And this isn't all the minerals that are in the water, some of them. It is a range, this changes all the time. But then essentially, silica, calcium, and bicarbonate are our most frequently occurring minerals. Calcium bicarbonate is basically Tums-ish. It's missing something important from Tums, but it's like what you would see in a cave formation. So there's a reason why historically people would say that certain waters were just good for stomach digestion. Right? Before you have Tums, you have water from hot springs. So we have a whole range of minerals. Most of them are in trace quantities. And then our total dissolved solids is under 200, and usually 250 is like a beginning of a heavily mineralized water. So we're really low on our mineral count. And our pH is right around our body, which is really cool. So your bodies aren't sort of rejecting that. And how is this happening? Again, just as a precursor, people have imagined that we have a big volcano underneath us. Others have rejected that theory and said that it's because we have dragons. We know it's not dragons because this is for Game of Thrones. They've all gone off. They're all extras in Game of Thrones. There's no dragons left. And there's also no volcano. If we had a volcano, we'd have different minerals within the water. Instead, the water goes down super deep, which is pretty impressive. Goes down between 4,500 and 7,500 feet. At that depth, it gets hot. And then it flows down, so it goes down, it stops at the fault line, and it comes back out. So it's getting heated by going down super deep. And we actually can use the silica concentration to tell us the depth, or the heat that it gets. We call this a geothermal gradient. You don't have to remember that term. It goes down, it gets hot, comes back out. We've also learned the age of the water. Has anybody heard of the age of the water? Yeah. What do you remember hearing?
Whittington's oldest.
It is the oldest, and we'll have this confirmed because my slide will say it. 4,400 years old. This has been reconfirmed and retested, though in the 2010s they retested it as 4,375 years old. So it's 4,400, give or take 25 years. So it's an ancient water source, which is pretty cool. We've also learned that. We also have been learning where the water begins. This is the outline of Hot Springs National Park. The blue is where the water recharges from. So any water that's collected, it's almost like a funnel that brings that water underground. They used to think that all the water was collected inside the park. Then they thought that the recharge zone, where the water begins, was like slightly outside of the park, but mostly in it. And now what do we see from this map? The majority of the recharge zone is outside of Hot Springs National Park. If anybody's driving to the village later today on Park Ave, you will be driving right next to or through the recharge zone. So we have a responsibility to keep it safe. And we as the collectively. I showed this map to one of my volunteers. He's like, yeah, I live right here. Like, don't put anything weird down the ground.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So like people live around there, and is there regulation on like what they can spray on their lawn, things like that, fertilizer?
Not really.
Short answer is no, right? We need to know the science about where it is before we can then educate people. So actually I see it as my job to say to the community, we are all in this together. How we treat our land is how we treat our water, and how we treat our water is how we treat our bodies. And that's nowhere is that truer than here in Hot Springs. And so we're just in the education stage. There's no required regulation yet.
So out of that 4,400 years, how much of that time is spent going down and how much is spent going up?
It's a great question. I've heard that it's 400 years to come up. I've heard that it's 1 year to come up. And I've heard those within 2 years of each other by two different people who are connected to the park. So I say, not sure yet. So probably a long time to go down and a very small time to come up because it gets about 150 at depth and comes out on average at 143. So it doesn't lose too much heat. We also have a shallow spring water system. So when you're thinking about the Hot Springs recharge zone, these are the high forested ridges east of the park. If it's a high forested ridge east of the park, has a good chance that it's in the Hot Springs recharge zone. This is our sort of like it builds the pressure and it collects the water. What impacts our local like day-to-day health of the water, health of the springs, is also the shallow groundwater recharge. And so basically from Hot Springs Mountain Tower down, comes off to a 2-week recharge. So every time it rains, there can be influence from the shallow groundwater cold recharge. That's why different springs have different temperatures, because they have different influence from the recharge zone. So good thing that this is a protected hillside by the national park, because because it gives us more oversight over how to keep things healthy. So we've noticed we have USGS gauges. Some of the springs do not care about rainfall. Some of the springs just living on rainfall. As much as 30% of the outflow will be influenced by local spring water. This is in the hot water. And so you can see this temperature throughout the year for this spring. You can almost calculate it for like big rainfall, no, big rainfall. So big rainfall, da, 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 da. Right? So every time it rains, there's an influence on some of the hot springs. Questions about that? We've just talked about the hot springs geology.
Is that a collective number, an average number?
These are individual springs. There are 9 springs that are monitored by the USGS, and they use temperature as their reference point. They can do other studies, but this is just a constant monitor on some of those springs.
And those collections are made when you go up to the mountain tower?
They're made, these are the green boxes.
Yeah.
Why don't we have geysers?
We don't have geysers because we don't have the right rocks for geysers. There's about 1,000 geysers in the world. 500 of them are in Yellowstone because they have rhyolite rock, which is a volcanic rock that is just, however the rock works, it is able to almost put a cap over a spring. And then the water that's heated is super heated just below the surface. Right? So our water has to go down around 4,500 to 7,500 feet to get to 150 degrees. So it's thousands of feet to go an extra 80 degrees. In Yellowstone, at Old Faithful, it goes down like a few hundred feet and it's boiling. And so it just builds up pressure faster right at the surface for that release. Yeah, but that's why we have the fountains to make it look like a geyser. Now, we got to talk about the cold springs because some of you don't drink the hot spring water. This is a map of the hot springs area. The green is the outline of Hot Springs National Park. And I have Blue Star, and this is Whittington, and this is Happy Hollow, and this is the thermal water. And so you're seeing these springs superimposed on the geological map. And I actually probably need to move this blue down a little bit. So, and these red lines are fault lines. So we have a fault line that comes right up Central Avenue and right up Fountain Street. That's where our hot springs water comes up. We have a blue dot at Happy Hollow. It comes right probably from this. So some of these fault lines over here comes out of the Navaculite. And then we have the Whittington, which is coming out basically at the base of West Mountain at a juncture between the Big Fork Church, which is this brown one, and a shale layer. So these springs are right next to each other. You drink from all of them. They actually have different water stories, even in that close proximity. Remember, because we've seen that the rocks got super smashed together. So we have a lot going on in a small space. So different springs right next to each other with completely different water stories and rock stories. It's pretty neat. So there's a reason why they taste different. They are different.
Question.
Yeah.
The Happy Hollow Springs, what's the age of that?
Somewhere between 20 and 100, as I was reading back through my...
It's the youngest water.
Yeah, super young. And so we can now compare not only the hot springs, right? We saw those numbers, but we can compare the minerals to the cold springs. Now these are ranges, right? So there's fluctuation, they change. But where do y'all notice some of the differences in the minerals?
The silica.
Silica. The hot water has a lot more silica. That's sort of like the standout. And that's probably because it doesn't go down, it goes down a lot deeper, and silica concentrations increase with temperature. So this tells us that the hot springs water goes down pretty deep to be able to gather more silica than Whittington and Happy Hollow. What else do we notice?
Bicarbonates from.
Yeah, the bicarbonate is very different. That tells us that just different rocks that it's going through. It's sort of the same for Whittington and for the thermal. Really low in Happy Hollow.
Because there's fluoride.
This is a naturally occurring mineral. It's one of the trace things, there's not much in it, there's lots of sort of trace things, but this is naturally occurring mineral. What else do we notice? Temperature, right, so this is basically your surface level temperature, your average temperature, so it's just a cold spring. The hot springs water, I have it actually 128 to 143, that's just the average, but the hottest spring in hot springs comes out about 147. And it's really a range of like 90 to 147. So we have these variations in the springs because they're different spring systems. They're right next to each other, but in large part they're not connected.
See a big difference in pH.
Yeah, the Happy Hollow has a much lower pH than sugar. This is sort of like a same level as your orange juice. So instead of salt and pepper, add orange. And then the pH here, for the thermal water, again, it's just about neutral. So our stomachs, our blood's around 7.2, 7.4. And so we have a similar pH there. And a little bit acidic, but more or less normal or neutral for Whittington Spring. Isn't that wild? Right next to each other, different springs. We didn't cool this off, it cooled itself off. Going back through, again, 20 years to 100 years, I wasn't able to find my definitive research again when I was going back through. More acidic, cold, a decent flow. If you turn on your water tap, it's about 2.2 gallons per minute. So this is essentially 2.5 sinks just constantly going. That's what's coming out of Happy Hollow. Whittington is 2 to 2.5 sinks constantly going. And the hot springs is about 200 sinks constantly going, which is a lot, but it's also not everything, right? I mean, it's not an unending resource. It's very peculiar, very special to have this. And it plays out to about 700 to 800,000 gallons a day.
So downtown,
Yeah.
the hot springs, there's two. There's one like right,
Mhm.
like on the main drag.
Mhm.
The other one's on the little side street there. Are those both the same? Are they both, those are both?
They are the same. Now, if you ask people who collect the water, they might tell you that they are seen different. But it's the same water. We distribute the same water to everybody. And there's a third spot too. I'll provide a
Yeah,
little bit.
Waha, there's a fountain sort of between two bathhouses. I don't really ever see many people on that.
Yeah, between the Maurice and the Hill, there's because remember the idea is that you should be able to walk around this.
So is that the same as the other two?
It's all the same
hot
water.
ones?
Yeah, if it comes out hot, it's all the same hot water. And Whittington, over 6,000 years old. Holy guacamole, how cool is that? It's ancient water. We don't know much about it because it doesn't have a high silica content, so we're not sure if it goes down the same depth, if it just like sits there mulling about for a long time. And then we have the hot springs water, 4,400 years old, again, ancient water. So the pH is neutral. The water is hot enough to cook off all the nasties, and it's low mineralization, as we've seen, and it is like, it hasn't been influenced by much of like recent human efforts. This is really special.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. The public health service officer doesn't, it's like, is this the cleanest water in the world? He's like, it's just really, I can't make that claim because he's a scientist, can't make this claim. It's as naturally potable of spring water as Mother Nature can make. Really special. And so we are actually required to provide the hot springs water for free. That's in our legislation, right? You can't use it, you can't sell it. Somebody tried it, they did sell it in the 1890s. But since the 1950s, we've been required to distribute the water. It's also not a coincidence that 1960s is when we really developed Whittington and the other spots. And today, this is going back to your question, turns out more slides than I thought. For treatment, to make sure that this meets health department standards, if we're going to provide the water for the people, we have to make sure that it meets health department standards. And so we use UV and ozone treatment as an antibacterial at the cold water stations. We have a particulate filter at the cold water stations, so just any extra mineralization. We have to test the temperature. That's just sort of normal water treatment processes. We also have to test the temperature at the thermal water because it means to make sure it stays over 130 at the minimum. We have pH testing just to make sure that things are going well. This is also to see if the temperature changes. That's our first sign that something has shifted in the system. Doesn't seem to be happening. We send off tests to the Arkansas Department of Health. We do nitrate testing, which is sort of like refuse in the water from us. And we've done PFAS testing to meet EPA standards. And so this water has to meet health code standards. And thermal water meets health code standards, it does not receive UV or ozone treatment, and it does not have a particulate filter.
What does the PFAS stand for?
It's the forever chemicals. If you're East Coast industrial stuff,
Teflon.
Teflon. So we have high concentrations of it in some water systems. We have to make sure that we meet the EPA standards, and we do, right? So it's an ancient water, so it hasn't had that much of a chance to be influenced by industrial stuff.
Is there any been found, even trace amounts of PFAS?
I asked that specific question, and I just got told that we met the EPA standards. So I don't know. I don't know either way.
Oh, yes.
But it's a true. I'm not sure. I just know that we met in 2022, whatever that updated regulation was. So the hot springs water is able to meet all those standards, and it gets no treatment. And so this is our message to the general public that it is an ancient water system and it is provided in its natural state. The temperature kills most of the pathogens. It is monitored to US EPA and Department of Health standards. Because it is in its natural state, there might be bacteria present, but we monitor constantly and daily to make sure that we are safe and effective. And so what we do recommend is that when people are collecting the water, because of the high temperature, especially in the thermal water, that people use food-safe containers. I put that part. This is new. This is the official. Yeah. And so again, not only do we monitor for the daily water, we have to manage those recharge zones, right where the water begins, the cold water, shallow recharge, and the larger recharge zone. And so your individual water store, your grandma's water store, you're coming down from Canada water store, you're coming from Wisconsin water store in New York and the village and moving to hot springs, right? It starts in the mountains and it continues with us. And it's this incredible resource that we have here in the park. We have some science, we have some stories. How does this change anything for you and your water?
Yeah, getting hot water now.
Okay, well, you'll have a chance. We're going to do a blind taste testing over here.
And I don't even drink water.
Maybe, but I didn't say that. All right, to test which water, if you have questions, now's a good time to ask. Otherwise, we're going to do a taste testing. And people will have a chance.
I just have
Yeah.
one question. So when I first started coming down here, we used to be able to buy a pass for $120 US. Walk off for 3 months. After COVID hit, they did away with the pass, jack up prices. So for us Canadians, it's really no longer affordable. It's $50 a day. So 10 days was $500. Why won't they bring back the pass?
So the Quapaw, you're going to hate this answer. The Quapaw is a private company that sets its own rates. And so
But it's the
they
only one you
operate.
can go to, right? The other
We
ones
have-
are all individual. They
Yeah.
a day.
That's the buck staff. So that's, I have no control over that.
But it's just part. But isn't would there be, like, the government isn't gonna control that?
So we could have a discussion afterwards, 'cause I don't know how I'm gonna say the right words and not have, try to placate you and say the things right, and. So they're all individual companies, on the road that have been able to sort of maintain those buildings. So whatever goes into their discussion on water runs and things, that's up to them. Oh, before you go, I wanted you to test the water. Now's the chance.
I've been to all three and
Okay.
more.
Okay. You already know which one
Three
you're on?
sisters, for instance.
Is
described
yours?
it, you know, but I used to collect from there.
Okay.
What's your favorite?
Whittington is the oldest.
Where is that?
Well, we have to decide if you like it. Yeah.
Somebody.
Run out.
The hot water in the milk.
Three sisters.
It's probably not ideal. I would only use the milk jug container at the water springs.
Yeah, it's still.
Just this is our, we can't control what people are able to afford other containers.
This is kind of outside of your thing with the hot springs here, but like the ones outside of town in the county, like just out of town.
Yeah.
Like the one down, Rocky Mountain Road,
Mm-hmm.
out there, there's one foundation out in Bismarck.
Yes.
Comes-
They come out of the ground because of that water, how the rocks are moving.
So are those safe?
I don't know if they're tested. They're not tested by us.
Probably not tested,
Right.
I mean, but if it's cold, it's not.
Right. That's up to you. Again, I might do different things on the weekends, but when I'm in uniform, we can only, we encourage you to use, Department of Health tested water.
Yeah.
Okay, but now you have a chance to test which one is your favorite, and maybe to keep, how should we do this? Which one is your favorite? I'm not gonna tell you which one, but